Hey everybody, Black Ninja 797 here, and welcome back to another video, guys. In today's video, we're going to be doing the first episode of our brand new series for Left 4 Dead, which is going to end up being Left 4 Dead What If. This is taking inspiration from the Marvel idea of What If, which, for those of you guys that don't know what it is, I will explain. Basically, if you were a fan of Marvel, you would know that the What If series is a series that is the kind of the concept of the idea of taking something that already exists within the Marvel Universe and then putting an alternate outcome on it. So, for example, just something fictional, I'm not necessarily sure if this was already done, but you could say, what would happen if Iron Man or Tony Stark didn't do the snap at the end of Endgame? Or what if it was somebody else? That's kind of like what we're going with here. We're just going to be asking the question of just, what if? What if there was a different outcome to something that already has happened? So that's what I want to do here for today's series. I also want to mention that I am going to be combining a little bit of elements from a other series that I have done before in the past, which basically was the same concept as this, and also the Marvel What If. It was called If It Were Different. It only ever had 3 episodes, and it was kind of the exact same logic that I had, but however, though, it was for movies, TV shows, and video games, and pretty much anything pop culture, so it was way too broad. But now I want to just narrow it down to Left 4 Dead. So we're going to be doing Left 4 Dead What If, and we're going to be taking storyline elements, gameplay elements, and just fun stuff about the Left 4 Dead series, and we're just going to be asking ourselves the question of what if. So if you guys end up enjoying this new series idea, and you guys do want to see more of it, I will definitely make more. If you guys want to have a particular topic covered in a future episode, please let me know in the comment section down below. But since this is the very first episode, I decided to pick the topic myself, and that is going to be the question about what if Bill did not sacrifice himself at the end of the Sacrifice campaign. Now this is, in my opinion, probably the biggest way we can start this off, season premiere if you will, because this is a big question and it's a big deal. What if Bill didn't sacrifice himself? Well, we could get into so many different things, but let's narrow it down just so that way, just like my previous series, it's not too broad. So let's talk about this and give ourselves some ground rules, alright? So we're going to assume that you're already in the Sacrifice campaign. We're going to assume that Bill, Zoe, Francis, and Lewis, they're not at Blood Harvest, they're not in any of the prior campaigns. Let's just assume that for the sake of clarity and continuity, that they're at the Sacrifice campaign, and they're at the very end, but instead of having to sacrifice, what they do is they have 2 options. You could either have one outcome where no one sacrifices themselves, and they just simply all escape, and then we can talk about what would happen onward from there. Or what we could do is we could do another outcome where there still is a sacrifice, but instead of it being Bill, it's either Lewis, Francis, or Zoe instead. So we're going to be talking about both of those because I feel like both of those can be a very drastic difference, and I think it'd be cool to cover both. So let's talk about both. Let's talk about the first one, about if no one had to sacrifice themselves at all. Let's just say that everything went according to plan and that Bill, Lewis, Francis, and Zoe all end up escaping. There could be a variety of different things that could have happened. You could have ended up having it be literal. You could have had them just escape on the boat that they wanted to get, their sailboat, and they could have ended up going to an abandoned island. Or another outcome would have been that just like every other situation when it comes to rescue in Left 4 Dead, they end up proceeding to end up having it go wrong, and then they end up having to go to another campaign, or in this case, another location to attempt to find a safe haven. So, what is the most realistic of all these possibilities? Well, let's just say the outcome that they end up getting the sailboat and then they go to the island. Let's just say that is the very first option. Realistically, with the way that the zombie apocalypse is treated in Left 4 Dead, it would honestly not surprise me if there was zombies on any given island. Because if you really think about it, no island is ever completely abandoned, and they never really specify what island they truly want to get. They never say a certain island in a certain state or country or anything like that, but we can assume that they want a giant island, a very, very big, plentiful amount of land, and somewhere very far away. Somewhere that's not too far away, though, where they can't get supplies, but decently far away where there's basically no chance of zombies or even people, for that matter. So we're trying to narrow it down as best as we can. So let's talk about some of these island ideas. So we're thinking about something about relatively medium to large size, something that's pretty decently far away, and something that would have at least enough resources to keep the crew alive for the foreseeable future. Now, in my humble opinion, this would be tough to do. because the way that the zombies work in Left 4 Dead, they do die in water. In fact, you can test this out yourselves. If you go into versus, you will know that if you play as even something such as the tank, if they fall into water, they will just instantly collapse and die. Now, I don't know if there's ever been something addressed about this with the storyline of Left 4 Dead, but if we're just going to say that it does correlate with the storyline, which we can, at least for the sake for now, let's just say that they can't swim. The zombies cannot run through water whatsoever, which means they would need some other means of transportation. They can't fly, obviously, so that would mean that they would either need to be transported or become zombies at that location already. So, the only way you could avoid this is either A, have the zombies never show up there, which means you would have to completely rely on the fact that no one would ever try to sabotage you and have no enemies, which is good because in my humble opinion, I feel like that would be slim to none, because in the Left 4 Dead universe, basically you can get infected unless you're immune by like literally anything, breathing, drinking it, having a cross-contaminated in your food, being bitten, scratched, everything. The mutations are crazy and it's always ever changing. We know this through the Sacrifice comic, where it changes daily. The green flu is always adapting, and it's never consistent. So let's just say that the characters are immune, but the chances of everyone else being immune is like basically slim to none. And as long as Bill and Zoe and Lewis and Francis never make any enemies, as long as Bill and Francis, which I feel like are the two that were most likely ever going to make any enemies, as long as they are careful about how they go about things with people that they may ever cross, I hope that they would end up doing well, because, you know, Zoe, Lewis, and Francis, when they met Ellis, Coach, Nick, and Rochelle, even though there was instances like, let's say, Nick was being a smartass, and that was like the closest that you ever had to confrontation between the groups, they really didn't have a problem with each other, and they weren't really trying to go at each other's throats. In fact, they tried to help each other. So, I think that the chances of them being on an island and not having people attack them is pretty high. I don't think that the chances of someone attacking them at all is going to be guaranteed. It could be either way. It could have been, you know, a 50-50, you know, them getting attacked, and a 50-50 of them not getting attacked. But I would say that the chances are more like rather 20-80. I really am pretty confident that they'll never get attacked if they go to this exact location that they intend to go, which is just this far-ass deserted island. Now, however, though, the other outcome is that zombies are already there, or people are already there and later become zombies. Because the way that the green flu works in the Left 4 Dead universe is that the virus itself spreads extremely fast. I believe that if you were to get a zombie on an island, especially if it wasn't taken care of right away, the whole entire island, regardless of how large it may be, it would just completely get infected and overrun. And you were surrounded by gulfs of water. So, depending on the way that they go about things, they would be completely screwed if they had a zombie apocalypse on the island. Because you would have to make sure that if shit hit the fan and things went wrong, you would have to have a means of escape, the supplies to end up surviving if you escaped, and know where you're going to go from there. Because if Zoe, Francis, and Lewis and Bill, like let's say, get to the island and there's people there, but they're fine for now, and they become zombies later, or let's just say they get to this exact island that they want, there already is zombies there, but they don't know until like later on once they've set up camp, they need to have a means to escape. I severely doubt that they would be able to clear the island and make it their own, because you could have any type of special infected on that island, not just commons. It could be, for whatever reason, infested with witches and tanks, and be completely unable to be survivable. You would just be screwed. It would be the luck of the draw. So the worst case scenario, they would have to evacuate the island and then move over to another island. Now, if they were to move over to another island, what are the chances that the exact same thing is going to happen? Well, it depends on where they're going. If they're going somewhere where there's a lot of islands right next to each other, you're going to probably have a fair chance of the islands all being infected, if one is. However, though, if you end up getting a situation where, let's say, you go to some random island, not a touristy spot, it has no historical value, it's just a random piece of floating land, and it's by itself. If it's at least survivable enough, and you know, maybe have to go out to get supplies, but not necessarily be where it's like too inconvenient, I can see that being more realistic. If you were to go to, like, let's say somewhere like Hawaii and have all those popular destinations for tourism, you're probably going to have zombies everywhere up the ass. But if you go somewhere like, let's say, some foreign country, because, you know, there's no problem with going to a different country. I don't necessarily know how bad the green flu would be in other countries because they never addressed it in the Left 4 Dead universe as far as I'm aware. But let's say that Bill, Lewis, Francis, and Zoe say, screw it, we're going to leave the United States, we're just going to go somewhere else. If they had the time and they had enough resources to do so and they could get to some other countries in the world, depending on how bad it was, they could go somewhere like such as Fiji, if they want to. Fiji has some very small islands, and not all of them are popular tourist spots because some of them are either A, extremely expensive, 2 as well, the weather can sometimes be very poor, and also 3 as well, is just the location in general is just super far out there. Now, yes, this kind of does contradict my tourist idea, but however, though, these are the types of islands that are usually privately owned and cost several millions of dollars, versus rather Hawaii, where you can end up taking a week-long vacation roughly for maybe like a couple $1,000s and not live there permanently. And because of that, more people are going to be likely to be there by the time that the apocalypse happens. Fiji, as far as I'm aware, and this is just an example of just a couple of other islands, but that's not really a place where people live truly. It's more rather a destination spot to be there for tourism. Hawaii has just as much people living in Hawaii as just as much as there's people trying to be there for a vacation. So that's just an example. So in my humble opinion, what are their chances of survival? Well, if they all escape the sacrifice and they go to, let's say, the island, and the island is overrun by zombies, I would say that their chances of survival, if they stay, are slim to none. Because depending on the luck of the draw, they can either get all commons, or they can get all tanks, all witches, all smokers. Basically, if there was a whole bunch of special infected, they would pretty much be screwed. If it plays like the way it does in the mutation, like such as special delivery, where there's just infected everywhere, it's unrealistic to assume that they'll survive. They could. They very well could. They've done worse. But I'm not going to put bets on it. So let's talk about the other scenario then. Like, let's say they end up escaping. And let's say they decide to move over to another island or just start to continue to survive some other means. That's more realistic in my opinion. And I've seen them do it before. I can definitely see them doing it again. And if, like I said, they go somewhere to Fiji, where it's so crazy to end up having the chances of people being there and unrealistic. In fact, I even think during the zombie apocalypse would be unrealistic, because even though Fiji some people might have the exact same idea as me. They might be like, hey, screw it, we're going to go to Fiji. The chances of people doing that are much more slim to none than it would be to do anything else. I would feel that the survival on the island idea is a lot more uncommon than people may realize. I try to promote the idea to a certain degree because I think it's a much better idea. But I feel like realistically, more people are going to be like, we're just going to survive in the United States or a given country we happen to be in. Let's just say it's the United States for clarity's sake. And they'll stay probably within their, the state, maybe there are a couple really close states, maybe like a state or two over. And they'll just probably just survive mostly like that. I doubt they're going to do, most people, the Walking Dead route of things where they just travel all over the country. I don't think that's likely. So that's one alternative. Now let's talk about the other outcome. So for the other outcome, it is someone else sacrifices themselves instead of Bill. Now we could talk about each individual one. So let's talk about them one by one. So let's talk about Lewis first. I feel like other than Zoe and Francis, Lewis is probably going to be the most likely right after Bill. Because Lewis is the type of person that I feel like would be the most courageous, even though he would probably hate it. He would probably hate to die. Lewis doesn't want to die, and even though he is a wuss in some ways, he's also very brave in other ways. In fact, I know that a lot of you guys say that maybe you've been too harsh on Lewis in the past, and he's actually quite badass. Which I do agree. It's just that he does have, kind of this yin-yang to him, where sometimes he can be one or the other. You catch his dialogue where he's talking to himself about being positive when he's in a bad state. So that's a good thing for Lewis. The reason why I would say Lewis would be the next likely candidate out of our 4 survivors to do it is because it's also kind of like a chain of command thing. Because if you really think about it, out of everyone else, Lewis is most likely to do it, and it's also probably the most fair for him to do it right after Bill. Is because, let's just say that Lewis, without thinking, just decides to go sacrifice himself. It really wouldn't be the biggest loss to the group that way, because if you really think about it, Lewis, if he were to jump, he would be the most likely, other than Bill, to pull it off, in my opinion. Like, you know, because you could have a situation, there's another outcome you can think of, is that you could have a situation where someone goes to sacrifice themselves, and they die trying to do it, but they don't succeed. That's also another thing you gotta think of, is that I think that Lewis would be the one to be able to pull it off. They all could theoretically pull it off. There's so many different things you could do. This is like the, it's like the Detroit Become Human thing where there's all the different outcomes and the branch expands. You know what I'm talking about? Like all the different linear outcomes. I feel like that there's an outcome where everyone could try this and yet some of them would fail. Like they just go to sacrifice themselves but yet they can't start the generator again. That could be a possibility, but we're not primarily going to be discussing that in this video because it would be way too broad. But let's just say that we go back to Lewis. If we go back to Lewis, I feel like he's not only the most likely to do it right after Bill, but he's also most likely to succeed. Because knowing Lewis, his charisma, his personality, he would be the most inclined to do it, and he would probably be the most likely to follow through. If you were to have it where, like, let's say Lewis did fully sacrifice himself and he did succeed in starting up the generator, that would remain now Lewis being dead, but now the main crew would be Bill, Francis, and Zoe. If Bill, Francis, and Zoe were the last remaining survivors, they probably would still stick with the sailboat idea, I feel, but only within a certain degree. Because here's the reason why. Bill, I believe, would still be absolutely hard set on getting the island. He would be, you know, completely heartbroken that Lewis would die, but he would still, for the sake of Francis and Zoe, want to end up getting to this island. He would want the rest of his now made-up family to survive. However, though, this wouldn't be without difficulty, because I can guarantee you that Zoe would give him massive shit for this. He would absolutely get the worst shit ever. He would get completely and utterly, verbally just destroyed by Zoe. And the reason why I say this is because right before the events of the sacrifice, Zoe and Bill are having disagreements. They're talking about what happens in the comic book. You can see this in the sacrifice comic, about how that Bill is being way too way too selfish, it seems, to Zoe, and Bill's just trying to say, hey, you know, in Zoe's perspective at least, hey, let's forget everybody and just all be on our own. Whereas Zoe wants to be able to help people by stopping the zombie apocalypse, whether it be by trying to find a cure or trying to kill the zombies, or basically just not leaving everyone behind. So Zoe would give Bill absolutely massive shit for this. In fact, she would give it massive shit regardless if it was Francis or Lewis, because, you know, Zoe does care about all of them, regardless of how she may feel in the moment. The reason why it just ended up being the way it was just because initially the canon ending was Bill. But let's just continue on. So if Lewis did sacrifice himself, Zoe would give him massive shit for this. And there is a likely chance that they may not go to the sailboat idea, because Zoe might be so absolutely resistant that she would just not budge. I don't think that's a guarantee, and I do feel like it is still more likely to have the island transition idea. I feel like that the island idea would work with the idea of Lewis dying, Francis dying, and then also all of them escaping. I feel like the island idea only would not work if Zoe were to die, which we'll get into later. But yes, I believe that if Lewis were to die, he would most likely succeed. But however, though, it would end up having a situation where Zoe and Bill's relationship would probably be strained for the rest of their existence. I can't imagine them getting through that. The only reason why Zoe might have been able to get closure is because of the fact that Bill did die. But if it was anybody else, especially if it was Lewis and Francis, I feel like the circumstances would have been much more different. Now let's talk about a slight difference with it being Francis. I don't think that Francis would be the one to do it. I feel like it would be Zoe, honestly, next down the line. But Francis could do it. You could be shocked, but you know, you might be able to see a possibility where Francis might be the one to sacrifice himself. I'm not saying he wouldn't. I'm just saying is that out of everybody, I feel like that's the least likely one to happen, just be given Francis's personality. Francis would probably try to end up doing the thing where he tries to, like, tough it out and tries to slay all the tanks, and probably tries to do this grit me manly thing where it's just like, hey, you know, I'm just gonna stand toe-to-toe with these 3 tanks that are coming at us right as the bridge is trying to get up. I think that he would probably do something like that. But if he had to last second, yes, he would jump and he would try to sacrifice himself. But because of that cockiness, I feel like he'd be more likely to fail. And that leads me into my other outcome, which I was talking about earlier, where let's say that someone were to fail trying to sacrifice themselves. I feel like because of Francis's, like, I guess you could say ego to try to survive, he would probably try to do a thing where he would probably wait to the last second where it was too late, and when he would go to sacrifice himself, either the tanks would reach everybody, and, you know, everyone would end up being a situation where he could either be killed, or he would end up having a situation arise where he just simply cannot make it to the generator to activate it again, which would then lead to the other survivors being 100% screwed, and one more person would have to try to jump in hopes of the sacrifice actually working this time, therefore leaving 2. And this were to happen, who would do it from there? Because let's say that Francis dies and he just fails. Out of Lewis, Bill, and Zoe, who would then be next? At this point, it would once again be Bill, in my opinion, because like I said, Bill and Lewis are the most likely to. So, out of chain of, you know, command, once again, it would be Bill, because Bill is still alive in this scenario, which would then therefore leave Lewis alone with Zoe. And they are, I feel like, would get along well enough because Lewis and Zoe are good friends. And I'm not trying to say that there is the, you know, 100% possibility of it, but there could be a situation where, let's say, that they could, at this point in time, hook up with the Left 4 Dead 2 crew, because I feel like that if it was just Lewis and Zoe, they probably would not do the island thing. And they would just stay. And then when the Left 4 Dead 2 crew would come around, they would probably end up going with them, because they would be alone. They would have too many people die, and they would want to be with people again. Because even though they would be theoretically going with the military, there's just strength in numbers. And in Left 4 Dead, having 4 people can sometimes be tough to kill a whole entire army of special infected. Try doing it with 2. You know what I mean? So now let's go down one last chain of command, which is going to end up being Zoe. What if Zoe were to sacrifice herself out of everybody? Well, if Zoe would have done this, this would have absolutely heartbroken Bill. He would have been completely and utterly destroyed. This would be the one thing that would break Bill. Because Bill loves everyone, but he has a very special connection to Zoe. The way I look at this is that Zoe looks at Bill as a father figure, and Bill looks at Zoe as a daughter figure. They have a really father-daughter relationship with each other. And that's why they're so passionate in their love and also their anger towards each other, especially towards the end of the sacrifice. They're just trying to convince the other one of their own opinion. So, what would happen is that I feel like that if Zoe were to die, Bill would feel awful. Because Bill would be like, oh crap, I just really got to the point where I drove Zoe so far away from me that she thought she was better off dead. Now, yes, this could be out of a thing out of love, but if you really want to be dark, if you really want to be sinister about it, she also could in this situation do it just because she doesn't see a positive future. Bill could have just made her emotionally distraught, and she could have just been like, hey, you know what? Maybe the old man's right. Maybe it is a thing where everyone's going to be on their own. So since that's the case, this life's not worth living. You could be very dark and sinister and say Zoe just wanted to sacrifice herself, let the others move on, but now she's home free and she's gone, she's out. She doesn't have to be a part of it anymore. Which is a really dark situation to think about it, so slightly lighter ones. Let's just say that she sacrifices herself just for the sake of the group. If she were to sacrifice herself for the sake of the group, you end up having now the situation where it's just Francis, Bill, and Lewis. And everyone would be distraught, but I feel like it would definitely most likely be Bill. And probably out of sheer guilt, I would think that Bill would abandon the boat idea. This would be the only situation where I could see that he would abandon the boat idea. Because the fact that Zoe was so resistant of it, and the fact that Zoe were to kill herself by sacrificing herself for the rest of the group, Bill would feel so guilt-stricken that he would be like, you know what, I'm going to honor Zoe's last wish, and I'm not going to take the sailboat, and we are going to just stay here, and we're going to save everybody. Which would lead them then transitioning to the Left 4 Dead 2 crew, which would mean that they would end up helping them out. Now, yes, Bill would probably still have a problem with the military and not go with the Left 4 Dead 2 crew at that point, but he would at least stay and try to help the group onward. So, out of all the scenarios, these are our circumstances and all of our possible outcomes. Situation A, everyone escapes and they end up taking the boat and they get to an island. If they get to the island, it could be completely safe and they could end up surviving. Happily ever after. This is the best circumstance. However, though, another outcome of that situation would be that the zombies are all already there, or someone sends zombies to get there because they make enemies. Now, if the zombies are all to the point where they're like special infected, the island would probably be uninhabitable and they would have to rinse and repeat and just go trying to find a safe haven again. But there could be another situation, slightly better. Not as best as the first one, but it could be a nice second one. They could go somewhere like a foreign country, and they could go somewhere where there's an abandoned island, or at least a island that is so touristy popular that it's way too expensive to realistically have people be there, or it's just, you know, kind of like a place where a lot of people wouldn't live anyway. Now we're going to be talking about the situations where someone else besides Bill sacrifices themselves. So, if Lewis were to sacrifice himself, I feel like that, yes, Bill would try to convince Zoe and Francis to still take the island, and then that cycle would happen once again. But however, though, Bill would end up having this relationship strain with Zoe, and they probably would despise each other. Or at least Zoe would despise Bill, but Bill would probably try to make amends, but it just would fail working. I can definitely see that, but who knows? Maybe it could work out after all. Maybe they might bond through grief. But another situation is Francis sacrificing himself. Now, if he does succeed, I still feel like they would move onto the island idea. I didn't talk about what if Francis did succeed. If he did succeed, they probably would do the island idea again, and then once again it would repeat. But if he were to fail, I feel like that the next chain of command thing would be Bill, and then therefore it would be Lewis and Zoe left, and then they would probably move on with the Left 4 Dead 2 crew because they want to have strength in numbers and be with people again. The last scenario is Zoe sacrifices herself. If Zoe were to sacrifice herself, now you have this situation where Bill would probably be so grief-stricken that he just wouldn't want to do the island idea anymore. So with Francis and Lewis, he would probably just stay put and help everyone, which would lead him to helping the Left 4 Dead 2 crew. So the most drastic difference of all of these would end up being that Francis ends up sacrificing himself, failing, Bill then does it, and then he succeeds, and then it's Lewis and Zoe left, and they move on with the Left 4 Dead 2 crew. That's probably the most drastic difference between the current sacrifice plot line. So that is my humble opinion about it. But now at the end of the day, guys, this is where I'm going to be asking you. What do you think about all these different ideas in the comment section down below? And what did you think of today's episode of Left 4 Dead 2 What If? This was a brand new series idea that I wanted to end up giving a try, and I wanted to end up seeing what you guys thought about it. So if you do end up liking it, please drop a like. I would definitely love to see the reception of this. And if there is a giant positive reception, I will gladly do more. I would like to have this be coexisting with all the other series that I do. But yeah, guys, that is going to be it here for today's video. I truly hope you guys end up enjoying, and if you did, please consider dropping a like once again, comment, and subscribe, and all that beautiful stuff. If you guys would like to financially support the channel, I almost tripped over my own tongue there, then I would definitely appreciate if you guys could go check out my Patreon. It is always linked down below in my YouTube video descriptions, or you guys could use supporter creator code BlackNinja797 in all caps in the Fortnite and Epic Games item shops, because that is very much appreciated. And this video is sponsored by my very first sponsor, which is going to be Epic Games, so shout out to you, Epic. But yeah, guys, I hope you end up enjoying another YouTube video for the most unique YouTuber you guys are ever going to see. Thank you for watching, guys, and peace out.
Hey, meme lords. Jesus here, and you better have enjoyed that video there by the eternal god Daddy Ninja. You should probably subscribe too, or the mighty Moab will come for your balls. If you enjoyed the video, you might like it too, and give me the memes. Flash, bang, boom!